In his 4th year with a crush on Gavin Middleton, he had another quarrel with the schoolgirl. The schoolgirl agreed to the confession of the gangsters outside the school in a fit of anger. Who knew that the gangster took it seriously and stubbornly stalked him? The schoolgirl finally got scared and cried at Gavin Middleton's desk. Gavin Middleton laughed and joked, "What's the matter with me, ex-girlfriend?" I thought this time they would be completely finished. But when the schoolgirl left, Gavin Middleton suddenly looked at me. "You go hook up with that thug, and get the peach blossom out for Daphne Ava." I looked at him in disbelief, my voice trembling. "Why, little tablemate, didn't you say it yourself? Willing to do anything for me." I froze in place, so embarrassed that I couldn't speak. "Gavin Middleton, you're peeking at my diary." Gavin Middleton laughed casually. "What's the matter? Isn't it all me anyway?" Recess. I slept on my stomach on the table, and my brain was a little dizzy. Gavin Middleton, Janet Sandick 1226, raised his hand and pinched the tip of my nose and chuckled. "It's almost class." I slapped his hand away in a slow half-beat, and my voice was a little muffled. "Gavin Middleton, I seem to have a fever, and my face feels hot." The sound of a chair rubbing against the floor was heard. Gavin Middleton closes the distance between the seats. The next second, there was a slight cool touch on my face. It is mixed with a unique male atmosphere. I opened my eyes in amazement, just in time for Gavin Middleton's crooked peach blossom eyes. He was smiling at me, his pale pupils breathtaking. "It's not hot." That's when I realized that he had put his face on mine. The thought made me blush instantly. I stumbled, Yes, I'm feeling hot." Gavin Middleton frowned, holding my cheeks with both hands. His eyes met, and he curled the corners of his lips. "It's pretty hot right now, maybe it felt wrong just now." The tail note rises slightly, as if it means something. "I think it's a fever, I'll just go to the hospital later." I panicked and looked away, my heart beating so fast that I couldn't speak. "I'll go with you, I'm not worried about you alone." Gavin Middleton was interrupted in the middle of his sentence. Daphne Ava, the schoolgirl, suddenly rushed in, crying like pear blossoms. The red and swollen eyes did not affect her beauty, but made her feel more pitiful. "Gavin Middleton, I've been pestered by those thugs. They're going to drag me to the billiard hall." Gavin Middleton was silent for a few seconds, then suddenly smiled. Ironic and sarcastic. "What's the matter with me, ex-girlfriend? Aren't you going to provoke them yourself?" They had a fight the other day, and Daphne Ava angrily agreed to the gangster's confession. From the first year of high school to the first year of college, they were divided into 4 years. This was the first time I'd ever seen Gavin Middleton so cold to Daphne Ava. Daphne Ava had tears in her pretty eyes, and seemed to be aggrieved to the extreme. "Gavin Middleton, are you really?" Gavin Middleton looked away coldly. "Not so." "Okay, don't come to me in the future." Daphne Ava covered her face and ran. "I've seen this pull too many times, and I'm used to it. Anyway, in a few days they will be reconciled." So I didn't react, just silently got up and prepared to go to the hospital alone. Gavin Middleton shouldn't be in the mood to with me right now. "I'll go straight home later. Do I need to help you see Daphne Ava?" My family is in the same neighborhood as Daphne Ava. In the past, Daphne Ava would lose his temper and refuse to see Gavin Middleton, and Gavin Middleton would ask me to go and find out. "No, I don't." Gavin Middleton turned his pen for a moment, and there was no emotion on his face. I was stunned for a moment. "Are you sure you don't need to?" Gavin Middleton and I grew up together, and I know better than anyone how much he cares about Daphne Ava. That's why I've always kept my crush in my heart. Don't bother, don't affect. That's my best explanation for this relationship. The ballpoint pen snapped and fell to the ground. Gavin Middleton's eyebrows were tinged with irritation. He picked up the pen impatiently, and suddenly looked at me. "Janet Sandy, you go hook up with that bastard, and get rid of the rotten peach blossoms for Daphne Ava." I looked at him in disbelief, my voice trembling. "Why?" I even thought I was hallucinating. Gavin Middleton propped his head on one hand, still in a nonchalant tone. "Solomon Wood, you know, the boy who almost knocked you over last time, he's the boss of the bastards. Take him down, and the crowd will have to listen to you." I had low blood sugar, and fainted on the side of the road. Solomon Wood was racing with a friend at the time, and if he hadn't braked in time, I guess he would be half paralyzed by now. "I think he's interested in you." He stayed in the hospital all night that day, and this guy didn't recognize his 6 relatives, and I've never seen him so attentive to a woman. And, little tablemate, he paused, deliberately prolonging his nickname. Didn't you say it yourself? Willing to do anything for me. At this moment, I felt like a clown stripped naked standing in the scorching sun for judgment. There is a brief blank space in the brain. This sentence is the girl's heart that I wrote in my diary in high school. How would he know? I froze in place, so embarrassed that I couldn't speak. Gavin Middleton, you're peeking at my diary. Gavin Middleton smiled casually, and there was even sincere doubt in his eyes. What's the matter? Isn't it me anyway? Besides, I'm not a peeking either. Your diary was knocked out during the sophomore year of high school. I picked it up for you, and I just saw it. So he always knew I had a crush on him. I don't know how to describe the mood at this moment. Disgusting, shocked, and incomprehensible are all intertwined. Stomach cramps, an urge to gag wells up. I was cold, and my eyes were reddening. Gavin Middleton, I'm not going. I can't help with this. When I was a child, I was ostracized from school because of my poor family conditions. Poor students with excellent grades are an outlier in top private high schools. Only Gavin Middleton was willing to play with me. It was he who stood up for me again and again when those noble children bullied me. Out of love, but also out of gratitude, I have been obedient to him since I was a child. This may also be the reason why he can make such an unreasonable request for granted. But now, I don't want to continue this relationship anymore. Those ambiguous, out-of-bounds behaviors that seem to be off the line are just his tricks to trick me. I was soberly and clearly aware that my 4-year-long crush was over for good at this point. Gavin Middleton's face sank, and his slender fingers unconsciously tapped on the tabletop. I forgot that he had always been impatient. Janet Sandy, just playing with him, not really. Break up with him after a while, just find a reason. I exhaled deeply, my drowsy brain aching terribly. I said, I don't want that. Gavin Middleton chuckled softly and frowned. Janet Sandy, you have been sponsored by my family for so many years, you must be a little grateful. Forget how your mom taught you. It's not easy for your mother to still work as a cleaner in my house when she is old. You should let her worry less. He spoke threatening words in the most relaxed tone, with the gesture of a superior. It became clear to me that he had never treated me as an equal. Self-esteem was crushed. I jerked my head up at him, tears streaming uncontrollably. Gavin Middleton looked at me for 2 seconds, sighed helplessly, and raised his hand to wipe my tears. The tone softened a lot. What are you crying about? It's not a difficult thing. Why don't you just change the name of those love letters you gave me, and give them to him? Okay, I shouldn't have mentioned your family. I quickly avoided him and took a step back. Large tears smashed to the ground uncontrollably, blurring the dark water stains. Gavin Middleton, I'll help you with that, but from now on, we'll settle the bill. Don't contact me again. The surging emotions came up, and I walked out without looking back. Halfway through, I remembered that I forgot to take my bag. I dragged my tired body back, only to hear Daphne Iva's disgruntled squeamishness. You say, are you just reluctant to Janet Sandy? Gavin Middleton's tone was helpless. She's my nanny's daughter, what can I think of her? It's just that we have been studying together since childhood, and our relationship is definitely deeper than that of ordinary friends. There's no pure friendship between a man and a woman, let alone a crush on you. I was choking on my breath, and my heart ached. It turned out that he also shared this matter with others. Daphne Ava started crying again. Okay, then what do you say? Didn't I say that last time? You ask her to go to other guys for a relationship, and keep her away from you. If she confesses to someone else, then I believe there is nothing between you. I've let her go. Really, okay, my little ancestor, don't make trouble, okay? Not having the courage to listen any further, I numbly raised my legs and walked out. Now I just want to go through this process urgently, and then cut ties with Gavin Middleton once and for all. Therefore, I took a taxi directly out of the school gate to the billiards hall on Bar Street. Loud sounds, pungent smell of smoke. The cold seems to be getting worse. The dizziness came out without warning, and I drifted on my feet and almost fell. Beauty, are you all right? A thug came up with a smile, a thief's eyebrow. I held on to the corner of the table and frowned uncomfortably. It's fine. I'm here to find someone. The thug grinned and followed. Who? Boyfriend. What's the point of finding a boyfriend? Brother will play with you. I pushed him away so hard that my heart was pounding. Go away. Don't touch me. What kind of pure? The thugs were kicked to the ground, clutching their abdomen into a ball. I looked up sluggishly. Solomon Wood's pupils are dark and deep, revealing a quiet sense of oppression. Narrow phoenix eyes, 3 whites below. It is aggressively stylish. Solomon Wood flicked his wrist and lifted his eyelids to look at me. The anger between his brows has not yet dissipated, like a wolf dormant in the wasteland. Looking for me? I nodded, barely keeping my eyes open. The brain burned faintly. I only vaguely remember that I came here to confess. Solomon Wood puffed out his cigarette and walked up to me. He narrowed his eyes and said in a cold voice, "What's the matter?" I froze for a few seconds, beckoned to him, and whispered, "You crouch down a little." "A little bit is fine, thank you." He was so tall that it was tiring to look up at him. I felt like I had a double vision in front of my eyes. The people around me took a breath of cold air and looked at me, with a neurotic look. It's funny, what the hell is this woman who dares to command Solomon Wood? How could the boss listen to a woman? Why doesn't she look smart? She can't be a fool. Before I could understand what they meant, the conversation suddenly stopped. Solomon Wood obediently knelt down on one knee and asked softly, "Okay." The air was silent for a second, and then suddenly erupted into a flurry of slumps. But I don't have time to think about why they reacted violently. I was burning all over and it was hard to breathe. Patting my head hard, I struggled to utter the words. "Solomon Wood, I like you. Let's fall in love. This is my love letter to you. I hope you will take it." I vaguely pulled a pink envelope out of my bag, and handed it to him slowly. Solomon Wood took it with a cold look and took it apart. The next moment, he stood up and slowly raised his eyes to look at me. "This classmate, can you explain to me why someone else's name is written in the love letter to me?" "Gavin Middleton. Who is it?" "Oops, forgot to change the name." I was like a character in a single-player game, who was on the hook and was pressed pause in place. I opened my mouth as if I were dead, and tried to make amends. But the feverish brain is like a mush. I couldn't think of a reason to get by. Solomon Wood raised an eyebrow lightly and motioned for me to continue. 188 tall, just looking at me condescendingly. The sense of oppression is too strong. My heart was so weak that I didn't choose what to say. "Mistaken, huh? I'm sorry, I got sick, and made a mistake." "Then I won't give it to you. You pay me back, pay me back." I stood on tiptoe to grab the letter, but my heart was too violent. The already weak body was caught off guard and fell to the ground because of a stumble. My eyes were black and I was dizzy. The pungent smell of disinfectant water penetrates the nasal passages. I frowned and opened my eyes. The snow-white ceiling of the hospital, the blue and white quilt, and the back of the hand with the needle pierced, and Solomon Wood, who sat on the edge of the bed. My eyes froze, and the memories of shame rushed into my mind as if a switch had been triggered. Help! What stupid thing I've done. I pursed my lips and smiled awkwardly. "Would you like water?" Solomon Wood unscrewed the mineral water bottle, and inserted a straw into it. I took it with both hands and whispered thank you. The air was silent again. Solomon Wood looked at me quietly, with no emotion in his eyes. I was a little numb from his staring, and countless rumors about him flashed through my mind. Cold-blooded, fatal, and outrageously rich. I heard that the last person who offended him just talked about him in the school forum, and disappeared in Beijing the next day. I shivered, and my heart beat harder and harder. Yesterday, what I confessed to you was actually... I mustered up the courage and scrambled out of bed and bowed to him. Confess and be lenient, and hope that my surrender will be forgiven by him. I agreed. I was dumbfounded and looked up at him, in a 90-degree bow. "No, you wait for me to explain it to you," I said. I agreed. Solomon Wood interrupted me again, his face unchanged. I looked at him in a daze, feeling like my CPU was burning. Solomon Wood tilted his head and smiled. "Did you confess to me?" "Yes." "I don't have the right to choose to promise your confession." "Of course not." "Well, so the process is right and it is right. What's wrong with that?" I was silent. "No problem. But it seems that there is a problem everywhere." Solomon Wood paused, and spoke lightly. Or are you playing with me? I shook my head frantically with a frightened spirit. If it weren't for the emotional and fever that burned out his brain, I wouldn't have dared to provoke him to death. Very well, then we're in a relationship now. Are you serious? I hesitated, but I still felt that the whole thing was too mysterious. Solomon Wood's lips deepened with a smile on her lips. You fainted twice in front of me. I'm afraid that if I don't agree again, you're really going to lie to me. It's really shameless. I lifted the quilt and put it on my face, pretending to be dead. How can a person die so many times? I heard the man's low chuckle in my ears, and my face turned even redder. Simply burrowed the whole person into the quilt. Solomon Wood stood up and rubbed my head through the covers. I'll go get the medicine and wait for me to get back. I let out an, still in the position of a turtle with a shrunken head. In just a few seconds, the sound of the room door opening and closing was heard again. I poked my head out in confusion. You're back so soon. The smile on my face froze at the moment I saw someone coming. Gavin Middleton. Why are you here? Gavin Middleton was stunned for a moment, his face slightly gloomy. Who do you think it is? I didn't answer and looked at him in silence. After knowing him for so many years, for the first time, I felt that I had nothing to say to him. In fact, it's not that there is no topic for greetings, but there is no desire to communicate. Gavin Middleton strode over to the edge of the bed, anger at the corners of his eyes. Janet Sandy, where the hell did you go yesterday? I didn't answer the phone. I didn't reply to the message. I didn't see anyone in the dormitory or at home. Do you know that I'm going crazy, looking for you? If you run out alone with a fever, even if you lose your temper, you have to have a limit. His emotional tone surprised me a little. I have the impression that Gavin Middleton has always had an indifferent attitude towards people and things. I haven't seen Daphne Ava angry except when he faced him. If this had been before yesterday, I would have secretly rejoiced that it was a sign that he cared about me. But for now, my focus is on why I don't hear any phone tones. I saved up 3 months to buy this phone, so don't break it. I turned around and fumbled with my phone at the bedside, in a perfunctory tone. Don't you know where I'm going? I went to Solomon Wood to confess. You asked for it. Gavin Middleton choked on my words, and was silent for a moment. He also seems to realize that he is the culprit, who caused me to lose contact with the disease. Gavin Middleton rubbed his brow bone irritably, softening his tone in compromise. I'm wrong about this. Right. I wanted you to divert Daphne Ava's attention, and Solomon Wood wouldn't agree anyway. It's just a bit embarrassing. After he finished speaking, he lazily leaned down and pinched my face. Next month's car, you sit in my co-pilot. Brother will take you first. Don't worry, I'll earn you back your face. Okay, Janet Sandy, don't mess with me. Hey. I tilted my head and continued to focus on tinkering with my phone. The screen has been black. It may be out of power. Solomon Wood agreed. What? Solomon Wood promised my confession. I lowered my eyes and pressed the phone button seriously, but I didn't look up at him. Gavin Middleton, however, seemed to be stimulated by something, and his hands on my shoulders forced me to tilt my head up and look at him. He agreed. I thought it was funny, so I actually laughed. What's the matter? Isn't that what you want? Gavin Middleton's face gradually darkened, and the force in his hand tightened unconsciously. I frowned in pain and slapped his hand away. Gavin Middleton let go of his hand as if he woke up. He took a deep breath, as if to suppress his anger. Divide it with him. Solomon Wood city and family background. You will be eaten to the bottom by then. Seeing that I didn't respond, he repeated the high volume again. Break up with Solomon Wood. Do you hear? Pry into my corner in front of me, when I'm dead. He was answered by Solomon Wood's contemptuous sarcasm. His slender fingers hooked a bag of medicine unhurriedly on the table, and instead raised an eyebrow and smiled. Or do you want to die? Is obviously a light and breezy tone, but it makes people feel cold all over the body for no reason. Gavin Middleton's face was calm, and his dark eyes were filled with emotions that I couldn't understand. Solomon Wood, Janet Sandy and we weren't the same kind of people. She couldn't afford to play. For my sake, you can act as if yesterday's incident didn't happen, and don't be serious with her. Solomon Wood smiled faintly and looked at him, with his eyelids raised. Gavin Middleton, you think too highly of yourself. Your face is worth nothing with me. Besides, in what capacity are you asking my girlfriend to break up with me here? Gavin Middleton has been pampered since childhood, and for the first time, he has been mercilessly dismissed. His face turned ugly. Solomon Wood ignored him, his bony fingers pinching the pill and bringing it to my lips. Take your medicine. I swallowed obediently. Thank you. Solomon Wood flexed his knuckles extremely naturally, rubbing the tips of his fingers against the corners of my lips. I froze for a moment, my face flushing uncontrollably. Gavin Middleton laughed angrily as he watched us interact as if no one was around. Janet Sandy, how long are you going to mess with me? Don't irritate me with this little trick. You know, I've never done that. I covered my ears and looked at Solomon Wood. It looks like a dog is barking and making noise. Solomon Wood curled the corners of his lips. I think I heard that, too. The next second, Gavin Middleton slammed the door with a cold face. After that day, Gavin Middleton and I started a cold war. To be precise, he deliberately ignored my existence. I don't understand why he's angry with me when I've solved his problems for him. We are like two strangers, and even if we meet each other, we will not linger on each other for a second. But I'd love to see it happen, and more importantly, I don't really have time to think about Gavin Middleton's anomaly. Solomon Wood looks cold on the surface, but in fact he is extremely delicate. The more I got along, the more I realized that those terrible rumors were rumors. Solomon Wood is simply a model boyfriend. He began to appear in my life frequently, filling every inch of my space. Do you want to see the car tonight? Solomon Wood put breakfast in front of me and looked at me sideways. The zipper of the black jacket is pulled to the chin. The facial features are three-dimensional, and the tear mole under the right eye is inexplicably hooking. I'm not going. I went to Gavin Middleton, and I went to their rich second-generation party, drunk gold fans, full of voices. I was out of place there, like an ugly duckling in a white swan, forced to endure scrutiny and scrutiny. But I want you to stay with me. Solomon Wood spoke lightly. The tips of my ears quietly reddened. Solomon Wood is always like this, calmly popping out a few blunt love words. It's class. I'll listen to the class first. Okay. Solomon Wood smiled casually. When Solomon Wood and I arrived, the summit was already very lively. A few boys rushed over with gossipy faces, serving tea and pouring water. Whoa, is this my sister-in-law? Hello sister-in-law. Sister-in-law. I have admired the name for a long time. Solomon Wood lifted his leg and gave them a kick. Don't scare your sister-in-law. Hello. I picked up my glass and smiled. Their attitude towards me was warm, unlike Gavin Middleton's group of fox friends. You wait for me here. I'll go change my clothes. Solomon Wood admonished. I nodded and sat down in a corner. Isn't this Gavin Middleton's babysitter? Is Gavin Middleton here today? Gavin Middleton. Why did your little nanny come to our club? Get the people away. I froze in place, embarrassed and helpless. At this moment, it was as if I was being teased again. I subconsciously wanted to get up and leave, but my arm was firmly grasped. Turning around, I crashed into Gavin Middleton's unfathomable eyes. Why are you here? Come to me. Gavin Middleton's eyes twinked into a playful smile. I shook off his hand, and the words were round. I'm not here for you. Gavin Middleton seemed completely unconvinced, instead curling the corners of his lips with interest. Janet Sandy, come here. The moment I heard Solomon Wood's voice, my heart settled. I trotted over to him without looking back, and whispered, I didn't know Gavin Middleton's friends were here. They recognized me and thought I was here for Gavin Middleton. Gavin Middleton's smile froze at the corners of his lips, and there was an inexplicable emotion rampaging through his chest. Gavin Middleton didn't know what was wrong with him. He just couldn't watch Janet Sandy's gaze stay on Solomon Wood, and he couldn't bear her to follow Solomon Wood away. Daphne Ava arrives and sees Gavin Middleton, staring at Janet Sandy's back for a moment. She clenched her hands, her face pale. Solomon Wood let out an and took my hand. The anger in his eyes disappeared the moment he saw me. Blame me. I didn't find out who was there in advance. Which made you uncomfortable? Glancing over the group of people who had just been smiling, Solomon Wood exuded a sense of oppression. Wait here. I'll send you back later. Solomon Wood neatly took off his coat and pulled the car door. The black supercar drifted steadily in the way down the hill and almost crashed into Gavin Middleton's new car. force Gavin Middleton's car to stop. Solomon would press the horn with one hand, his brow furrowed. The posture is arrogant and lazy. Lap. Under the influence of inertia, Gavin Middleton almost hit his head on the steering wheel. The nameless fire in Gavin Middleton's heart rose instantly, but Solomon Wood is still adding fuel to the fire. What's the matter? Don't you dare to compare with me? I'm leaving. There was a burst of laughter, mixed with excited whistles. Daphne Ava sat in the passenger seat, clearly startled by the sudden braking. She covered her face, her voice crying, "Gavin Middleton, let's go back. It's scary." Gavin Middleton ignored it and lowered the window. "Bet on what?" Solomon Wood smiled nonchalantly, in a playful tone. "Of course I can, Gavin Middleton. I'm mainly afraid that you can't afford to lose." Gavin Middleton turned on his headlights and said aloud, "If I lose, you're at your disposal. If you lose, stay away from Janet Sandy in the future." As soon as these words came out, the exclamation almost toppled the mountaintop. Daphne Iva's eyes widened, and her face almost distorted. "Gavin Middleton, you really care if she does?" "I'm getting out of the car, Gavin Middleton. How could you do this to me, Janet Sandy?" Solomon Wood snorted, a terrifying chill in his eyes. Screams rang out, and the countdown to the game was counted. One red, one black, two famous cars galloping on the winding mountain road. The roar of the engine exploded in the night. The speed of the car is getting faster and faster. I was so nervous that my palms were sweating, for fear something might happen to Solomon Wood. The distance between the two was tight. At the final corner, Gavin Middleton suddenly pulled inside. Solomon Wood didn't shy away. "Damn, Solomon Wood is too fierce. This car is more than 10 million. It's been a long time since Solomon Wood has been so won, and today was an eye-opener. This Gavin Middleton, I must have thought Solomon Wood would let him." The two cars were close together, and sparks flashed between the doors due to friction. Solomon Wood suddenly accelerated, crossing the finish line. The cries are at their peak. A loud crash followed. In the noisy crowd, Gavin Middleton's face was darker than the bottom of the pot. He stared at Solomon Wood and pulled out his car keys. "The car is yours. It is the club's default rule that the loser gives the car to the winner." Solomon Wood didn't answer, and spoke coldly. "Apologize to my girlfriend. You, including your friends." The atmosphere suddenly became tense. "The one who just called my girlfriend's babysitter. Do you stand up yourself, or do I ask you to come out?" He bit his cigarette and lit it. His gaze slowly slid over Evrion's face. Forget it. Everyone knows each other. Just kidding. Apologize in public." Where do we put Gavin Middleton's face? They also drank too much. Seeing that the situation was deadlocked, someone came out to play a round. Solomon Wood tugged at the corners of his lips, but there was no smile in his eyes. "Okay, then you knock one for them to give my girlfriend, and this matter is over." As soon as these words came out, Evrion's faces changed. Solomon Wood is real. I squeezed his palm and motioned with my eyes for him to forget it. Solomon Wood pulled me into his arms, and whispered in my ear, "What are you afraid of? I'll give you your back." I looked at him in a daze, and my heart skipped a beat. This is the first time I have realized so intuitively that liking someone is not willing to let her suffer a little grievance. Wood's home is a black and white presence in Beijing. When everyone saw that Solomon Wood was going to get to the bottom of it, they had to apologize to me honestly. Gavin Middleton was the last one. He looked at me deeply, and the emotion in his eyes was indiscernible. Daphne Ava was holding on to the trunk of the tree, and vomiting so hard that he didn't even look at it. I withdrew my gaze and smiled at Solomon Wood. "Let's go back." Solomon Wood lifted his chin. "There's not another over there. I don't care. Gavin Middleton doesn't deserve any of my attention, and I don't even feel worth it for Daphne Ava." Residence halls. I was stuck at the top of the stairs by Gavin Middleton. His face was gloomy, and the air pressure around him was very low. "You and Solomon Wood, seriously?" I don't want to say a word." Gavin Middleton's emotions suddenly spiraled out of control. "Without warning, you've only known each other for a long time, and you dare to hang out with him at night. You've never been in love, and now you've been deceived by his appearance. It's not that you don't know the situation of their family. He is at most playing with you, and you won't have any results." I listened quietly, and then suddenly smiled. Gavin Middleton, don't tell me you're jealous. Gavin Middleton's Adam's apple rolled, and a trace of struggle crossed his eyes. If I said yes, would you break up with him? Remembering my humble and careful crush, my eyes reddened. I sniffed and whispered, Gavin Middleton, don't be cheap. And Solomon Wood respects me a lot. He's 100 times better than you. Gavin Middleton stopped me again, his voice a little hoarse. Janet Sandy, you've been there for me all these years, and I'm used to your presence. I thought it was just a habit, but today I think I'm going to crazy, to see you standing with someone else, and you smiling at him. Janet Sandy is obedient. Will you break up with him? I looked at him coldly, and said word by word, not good. Gavin Middleton, I made it clear last time, and I've already repaid your favor. Let's not have any more contact with each other in the future. Solomon Wood will not be happy to hear this. Gavin Middleton's eyes were scarlet, accentuating his tone. Solomon Wood, don't mention that name to me. He laughed as if he had thought of something funny. Janet Sandy, you said he would still like you if he knew you were chasing him as an oolong. Guess he'll get revenge on you. I looked up at him in disbelief, trembling with rage. Gavin Middleton, are you threatening me? Gavin Middleton laughed like a jerk. Janet Sandy, it's too late for you to break up with him. Otherwise, I'll have to divide it for you. I couldn't take it anymore, and slapped him. You're going too far. He was slapped away and touched his cheek. What should I do? Your boyfriend seems to have heard it all. I turned around in a panic and met Solomon Wood's dark eyes. No. Solomon Wood, listen to me tell you. I wanted to turn myself in with you, on the first day in the hospital, but you interrupted me, and I didn't dare to say anything later. But I really like you, and the more I get along, the more I like you, and I'm afraid of losing you, so I haven't had the courage to confess. Gavin Middleton tilted his head slouchedly. Do you hear that, buddy? She didn't confess to you because she liked you at all. You were tricked. The next second, Gavin Middleton was slammed to the ground by the collar. Solomon Wood crouched down, grabbed him by the hair, and slammed his head into the greenery. Dude, did you hear me? She said she really liked me. Infirmary. I carefully rubbed Solomon Wood's hands with iodine. He's too heavy for me to stop. Broke the skin of his joints. In the end, it was the security guards who stepped in and Solomon Wood calmed down. Solomon Wood looked at me without saying a word, looking detached. The heart is diffusely sore. I know that I am wrong, and I don't have the face to quibble. Anyway, I lied to you in the first place. I'm sorry. If you want to break up, I don't have a problem. You want to take revenge on me, then I deserve it. Solomon Wood pinched my chin and kissed it down, fierce and lingering. Break up. You still want to break up. The lips and tongue are intertwined, and the breath warms up. I was kissed so hard that I fell on his lap. Not. Solomon Wood buried his head in my neck socket and licked the soft flesh on the side of my neck. Not everyone is as blind as Gavin Middleton. Whether you're true or false about me, I have the most say. I know you're slowly liking me. As long as you can like me, that's enough. Baby, did you know that I've been waiting for you to like me? I've been waiting for you to look back at me. But I'm angry that you can see I'm unhappy, but you don't coax me. Who knows? 188. The cold-faced handsome guy suddenly asked for coaxing. My cheeks and neck began to burn, and I stumbled. I'm sorry, I'm not very experienced. How do you coax? Solomon Wood's punishment seemed to leave a tooth mark on my lip. He picked me up, and locked the single room, then pushed me against the door. The low voice bewitched. Baby, kiss me. Good job. Well, this side too. The video of Gavin Middleton being beaten up after harassing me that night was recorded. Daphne Ava swiped and completely collapsed. She rushes into Gavin Middleton's hospital room to ask for an explanation, but Gavin Middleton insists on breaking up. Daphne Ava pushed him off the hospital bed in a fit of rage. It just so happened that Gavin Middleton's injured leg hit the ground first, and I don't know what nerve was pressed, which actually caused hemiplegia. Daphne Ava is also at risk of prosecution for intentionally injuring someone, but it's none of my business what happens to them. I have a bright future ahead of me. When I heard the news, I was preparing materials to go abroad. Solomon Wood looked up casually. I heard that Gavin Middleton is going to be transferred to the United States for treatment, which is quite close to your school. I stifled a laugh and deliberately followed him to him. Really? Then I'll have time to see him. After all, it's an old classmate, and their family has sponsored me before. Sure enough, I didn't count to 3 in my mind. The body was lifted up in the air. Solomon would wrap me in the quilt and lean down. Come and tell me when you're going to see him. I wrapped my arms around his neck, and couldn't help but keep teasing him. Solomon Wood has been getting more and more jealous lately, and he has to eat this kind of flying vinegar that can't be beaten with 8 poles. I'm going to go as soon as I get off the plane. Our Janet Sandy is really good. She won't be tired after a dozen hours of flight, and she still has the strength to visit the patient. He grabbed my waist and kneading it back and forth, quietly, since Janet Sandy has so much energy. Don't sleep tonight. No, no, no. The skin around the waist is cold, and the pajamas slip off. Solomon Wood took my lips in his mouth and chuckled. Janet Sandy. It's late. The end.